Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah and welcome to Pivot today on Hilal TV with me, my guest Jo Bluen, and I'm continuing from the discussion of the previous week. We're focused a lot on Zionism and Judaism, the difference between the two, and how what is happening in Israel today is feeding into a particular kind of hatred that might lead to more anti Semitic behavior. When we speak of anti Semitic behavior, we mean some behavior that is a manifestation of hatred towards Jewish people and not necessarily only towards the Zionist state. And this is very problematic. Much of the reflections and the discussion that I had with Jo revolved around understanding her identity, understanding her whiteness, but also her Jewishness, and how she placed herself then in the South African context to find, that space in which she can assert her identity in her full humanity and also make a contribution to the Palestinian struggle. So, thank you very much for being with me, Jo, and I'd like to welcome you back. Starting again from the continuation of this your personal identity, as straddling between Jan Smuts, the Balfour Declaration, standing here in this midst of this very confusing space. You're there right now, and you are also in Cape Town. It is a very confusing identity because, the joke where we say that Cape Town is another country. And in terms of what has been playing out in politics so often, we've seen how the DA has responded towards the Ukrainian conflict and their absolute silence in terms of what is happening in Gaza, in Palestine, always capitalizing on promoting a white supremacist racist ideology, allowing the Ukrainian flag to fly, but not allowing the Palestinian flag to fly. When you encounter these discrepancies in your personal identity and then as you as an activism, how do you relate to this? And do you feel that you need to give voice to these discrepancies through the activism which you actively engage in?
I think it's a great question. And I think, there's an interesting idea about contradictions. And I don't think this is contradictory at all. The discrepancies between the approach to Ukraine versus Palestine. And I think the DA's response is in fact a microcosm of much of the global response. And also the kind of the resistance, the kind of global resistance in support of Palestine is also reflected in the South African context. In terms of giving voice, it's a big, I guess, a Jewish principle in a way is, but not exclusively, but is very much a call and response. So I tend to, I don't really believe in the idea of a voice for the voiceless. I don't think there are voiceless. I think there are coercively silenced people, and I know that's I can't remember who said that, but. So I'm here for it. I'm disgusted by the DA's absolute, push to the right. And also, I think it's very interesting. We saw a couple of years ago, I remember the DA referred to the EFF, for example, I think as brown shirts. Someone, I don't know who it was specifically. That is an absolute disgrace and dishonoring of our ancestors who died, by the killings of the brown shirts and the Gestapo. And yet there's this idea that, when it comes to Israel, they're protecting anti-Semitism. And that's, I think I'd much rather see a DA, if it was interested in protecting Jews, in not using Holocaust analogies to describe political parties in South Africa in out of outrageous contexts. And also, as a Jewish person and as a Jewish person who takes, mourning very seriously, to see the weaponization of our grief and our loss and our dead to support political ends is mortifying.
In the first segment, you spoke something about being here, a presence. Can you elaborate a little bit to me on this Jewish concept, this presence about being here? Because I think it's very intricately related to an Islamic understanding also of, fully recognizing your consciousness and being present in the day. So we're present in the salah, in our prayer, we're present in our engagement and interactions with each other. And that presence is something that actually makes you recognize the dignity and the humanity of another person. Because if you're not present, then it is almost as if you're speaking down to or speaking at someone, but never speaking to someone.
Yeah, I think that's really beautiful, and I think it's also, one of those one of those things. I was watching this speech by the minister Naledi Pandor at Al Quds Mosque the other day, and her drawing parallels between Islamic and Jewish and Christian concepts of justice. And I was really moved by that. And I'm now thinking about this idea of presence. And I think, so I think it's a few things, and I think it's very similar. On the one hand, it's called Doikait. It's an Ashkenazi kind of, it came from the Labor Bund. And it's the idea of we don't need a state of Israel. We need to be present where we are, and we need to work in coalitions with others. We need to understand the societies we're in and be a part of them in whatever ways we can and are. And it is. And I think this is this parallel that strikes me when you speak is the idea of it being a relational presence, right? And I think it's particularly important in the context of South Africa, where there is this idea, and many Jews are also white, and that's not the case all over the world. Of course, we have Arab Jews and Black Jews, and but there is this idea of how do you be present when you are present, and what is your relationship to each other and to the land, to your fellow people, your fellow Jews, to people who are not Jewish, and it's really a beautiful idea. This idea of is Hineni, I am here, and I think it relates to I am here because you are here, and we are here in relation. And I think that's I think relation and community beyond our individual religious communities and within them is so important.
It's almost drawing a parallel even to Ubuntu, that I am because you are. And we are together as a community and an ummah amongst the Muslims, we share the same feeling amongst all the brotherhood. And everything that you say is totally opposite to the way in which the Zionists behave and the Israelis behave and the Israelis present themselves and the way in which they treat the other person, as if that person, those people, the Palestinian people, the Arab people, they are not even present, not even worth a presence, let alone a shared presence. So how is it that this obfuscation between Judaism and Zionism is allowed to prevail when there is something so beautiful in the Jewish religion?
Yeah. Oh, if I had the answer for that. I think, I think there's a powerful myth. Myth is really, really powerful. And I think it's a complete corruption. Zionism is really, in many ways, I've had discussions with some friends and comrades and colleagues about this, about whether it's a corruption or it's a deviation from, but let's take it as something or a bastardization of Judaism, and it's so the idea of a land without a people for a people without a land, and was the kind of one of the prime Zionist ideas, and one of the key things there, which many people have said and many scholars have said, and that in many ways, Zionism was deeply anti-Semitic in its in many forms. The idea was, Europe has a Jewish problem, and we need to get rid of the Jews. So let's put them somewhere. And the idea then became, taking out Europe's guilt on the people of Palestine and the land of Palestine. So yeah, it's as I understand it, I think there's two things. And number one, I think, as I've mentioned, it is just a corruption of every Jewish true value, and on the other hand, I think it's a kind of the indoctrination process of kind of bringing the idea that to be Jewish is to be Zionist has been such a full-scale thing that it's a kind of radicalization in many ways. It's an extremism. So, for example, the word for going up to the Torah to do a reading is to make aliyah, which is the same word as immigrating to Israel or going to settle in Israel, aliyah, to make aliyah. So, I think there's many of these concepts where beautiful Jewish concepts and ideas are kind of being corrupted or used
usurped
for this
in a
kind
way.
of
Yeah. So we have to go to we have to go to a break now. But when we come back, I want to just raise the whole question of the South African Jews for a free Palestine and how you're pushing back against this usurpation of Judaism and Jewish concepts, and also pushing back against the whole concept of Jews are Zionists or Zionists are Jews. But we'll see you after the break. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the second segment today with my very dynamic guest, Jo Bluen. And before we went on to the break, Jo was explaining to us about how this conflation has come about. And she describes it beautifully as a usurpation of very many Jewish concepts. Now, Jo, we have seen a pushback from Jewish people all across the world. I think for the first time in the history of this occupation, there has been such a strong and formidable Jewish voice pushing out against what Israel is doing. Jewish people coming up to say, not in our name. And South African Jews for a Free Palestine is one such organization. Also, at the same time, what is significant is that it represents young people, young Jewish people, liberal people, ordinary people, people who look like me and you or every other South African, not only, those dressed in the Jewish garb, etc., conservative Jews, like we know the Torah Jews are pushing very hard against the Zionist state and the ideology that they are perpetuating, which actually is harmful for Judaism and for Jewish people. How was the South African Jews for a Free Palestine formed? Why was it formed? Who is the founder and how did you get involved?
Thank you so much. Yeah, so I think first of all, on your point, I think, one of the things that's, and I won't have to tell you about erasure, because we know, I'm looking at the bombing of, besides the killing of humans, the bombing of archives of universities, of histories within Palestine. One of the things that's also been erased from history very consciously is the history of anti-Zionist Judaism. It's always existed in different forms. You've had sometimes this idea of a kind of holy land, and I don't know, I might be getting this wrong, so please correct me, but it's not where you go and live necessarily. It's an idea, maybe like Mecca, kind of. It's it's not a settlement place. But yeah, so I think that's really, a really important point to remember. And yeah, so South African Jews for a Free Palestine, we are a member of the SABDS coalition, and we have been committed to a Free Palestine for a very long time. About a decade and a half, I think. Our chair is Rena King, who is also involved in the anti-apartheid struggle. We have many of our elders who are amazing, who who Mil Savers, for example, who have all been involved in anti-apartheid struggle, and kind of recognize the parallels between apartheid in Palestine and in South Africa. And yes, and we are a collective. It's a diverse collective. We have different views, but we are all committed anti-Zionist, and we are all committed to ending this genocide, calling for a ceasefire and the abolition of the state of Israel as a settler colonial fascist entity. And I just sort of at this point want to say, we've been so grateful to Hilal and its viewers for being such an important part of our community, and to you too. So just to say, while we're here, just to say thank you, and also, one of the things we do is, I might be talking a bit much, but
no, please go ahead.
We have since October, we've had what we call Shabbos Against Genocide, and that's our Sabbath, and we invite people of all faiths. We do a prayer for the Nakba, a prayer for Gaza's children, a series of prayers about justice. We don't serve wine, which we often do in our families, and we serve grape juice so that our Muslim guests can feel welcome and join in. So all of your viewers are, of course, welcome to join us, and the idea is to kind of come together and refuse to allow our faith to be weaponized for the purposes of genocide.
This is beautiful because it shows that there is a sincere commitment and activism every week to remind yourselves that we need to do something for the freedom of Palestine, for the freedom from occupation of Palestine. And is this then your Shabbos, your Sabbath? Is it then a form of activism, social activism, in order to achieve, firstly, a mental justice, to get that understanding in your mind that we as human beings need to forge forward every single day, every single week, to remind ourselves that there are people out there who are oppressed, and collectively we meet, we discuss, and we decide how to go forward, that we need to do something. And I'm asking you this in all earnest because I find that in many instances amongst, our youth, and even amongst the Muslim youth, there is a kind of complacency. We can't really do anything, so what should we do? There isn't even the effort to come together to meet, like you meet in this beautiful space, a religious space, celebrating your Sabbath, but using that Sabbath as a platform for social justice. It's politicizing also, in a way, your religion.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this is absolutely, look, I think the thing about Shabbos is that, it happens every Friday, 18 minutes before sunset, you light candles. In my personal life, whether I'm, if I don't like them, I feel wonky for the week. And we've also, we've partnered with Save Our Sacred Lands, Indigenous movements in Cape Town. We actually had a Shabbos at the Tennyson Street Mosque not so long ago. And it is, number one, about, I think there's a few things, and we're not dogmatic about it. I think on the one hand, one of the things we're noticing, and this kind of has come up a lot, is that a lot of Jewish people are moving away from Zionism. Our numbers have grown tremendously in the last while. So to kind of, on the one hand, provide a space for especially young people who are asking questions, who are thinking a little bit about where they are, and to have a safe space to celebrate the Sabbath, especially if they're quite alienated from their families, because their families might be more Zionist. On the other, it is obviously a religious Sabbath. We do the full service. It is also a space where, in this time of fragmentation, we kind of form bonds together. We bring together different people. It's very open. People from all faiths are welcome. People who are agnostic, for example, are also welcome. Muslim comrades are always welcome. Everyone's welcome, and we sing, and it's a very open table, and very much, the way some of us were lucky to grow up where the Shabbat table was always kind of open to people from anywhere who wanted to join and to eat a meal and to celebrate together.
So it
But as you say, it's also,
sorry, no, it sounds to me like young people like to have fun no matter what the situation is. So I'm going to interrupt you here because we're almost at the end, and I want to get very quickly, and you have to condense this for me, Jo, in your answer. We have like 2 minutes left. What is your understanding of the Jewish lobby of AIPAC influencing elections and democracy, specifically if we bring it down to South Africa?
Sorry, I missed that question.
Yes,
sorry.
if we bring it to South Africa, the influence of the Jewish lobby and organizations like AIPAC influencing, elections in the U.S., but the Jewish lobby bringing in the Zionist. Let me put it this way. Sorry, the Zionist lobby influencing elections in South Africa, and they're trying to push a particular outcome because we've seen that they, pretty angry about what South Africa has done at the ICJ.
Yeah, I think it is something to be aware of. I think number one, the kind of the kind of Zionists, the Christian Zionism is a major thing, and I think this is throughout Africa as well. And I think the kind of the whether it comes to how I think one of the things we should watch out for, let me do this quickly, is how the narrative is managed. Because I think before there is colonization, there is always colonization of a narrative. And I think what South Africa did by going to the ICJ was challenge some of the more right-wing narratives. And I think that is something to deeply, deeply watch out for in advance of this election.
So thank you very much for that understanding and that analysis. And we hope that, together, like you said from the start, we all meet together, come together, realize our humanity together, and hopefully together we'll be able to do something to stop the genocide. In 1 minute, before I close up, Jo, do you see an end to this genocide soon because you're a genocide scholar?
I have to hope. I have to hope. And I think it will come from people listening to the Palestinian resistance, listening to the people of Palestine, pushing for ceasefire, pushing for an end to genocide, but also pushing for an end to international Zionism and the abolition of the apartheid state. No empire can last forever, and we are going to fight until there is a free Palestine.
Thank you so much for those powerful words. And for your, no, please go ahead. Did you want to say something?
No, just an end to apartheid everywhere, global apartheid.
Yeah, we can hope. I love that. And we have to hope. Because if we don't, then we're in a very dire situation. It's also for us to recognize that it's the end of humanity. And then how do we go forward? So with hope, we end this particular segment with our beautiful guest, Jo Bluen, who has shared much of her insights with us. And hopefully, as Jo says, let us always come together, consciously understand what is happening. After all, that is the duty of the Muslim too, to consciously understand what is happening. Most importantly, is to keep asking questions. Don't just sit and be a passive receiver of news and information. Don't be indoctrinated, and don't even take your religion as dogma. Things need to be questioned, and we need to see how it is that we're going to go forward to create a better space, a better place, a better South Africa as we go into elections this year, and ultimately a better humanity. Fi amanillah, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.